Welcome to today's deep dive. Today is Monday, May 18th, 2026, and we've got a really interesting one for you today.
Yeah, we absolutely do. It's one of those topics that hits close to home for a lot of people.
Right, exactly. Because look, whether you work in compliance or, IT, or honestly, if you are simply just trying to survive a corporate software migration, I want you to picture this scenario.
Oh boy, I think I know where this is going.
You probably do. So, your company announces this massive, $1 million technology upgrade. You sit through the town halls, you see all the flashy slide decks, and everyone is promised that this new system is going to make your daily life so much easier.
It's a silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
It's going to eliminate the busy work.
Exactly. It's supposed to clear up the cross-departmental confusion, automate all those soul-crushing manual tasks, all of it. And then the highly anticipated go-live date actually arrives.
Right.
The platform launches, and somehow everything is actually worse.
Yeah.
You are suddenly doing twice the work just to feed the new system.
It is a painfully universal corporate experience. I mean, you log in, and instead of a streamlined workflow, you're met with 50 required fields, confusing drop-down menus, and a system that seems actively hostile to how you actually do your job.
It really does feel hostile sometimes. And today we are unpacking a single, incredibly detailed source that explains the mechanism of why this happens, specifically within governance, risk, and compliance, or GRC.
Which is a massive industry right now.
It really is. We are looking at a really insightful article from GRC PROS. It's all about the operational strategy of GRC platform modernization. And our mission today is to understand their fundamental premise.
Right, the idea that better software doesn't equal a better program.
Exactly. Organizations spend massive budgets on shiny new GRC platforms, hoping to magically achieve centralized risk data and, an end to audit chaos. But the uncomfortable truth is, it doesn't work out that way. Okay, let's unpack this. Why do incredibly smart, well-funded organizations keep falling into this trap?
Well, basically, it's because they approach a GRC implementation as a technology installation.
Instead of what?
Instead of a business operating model transformation.
Right.
I mean, the source material outlines this concept, and they call it the as-is migration trap.
The as-is migration trap.
The underlying illusion here is the belief that moving your existing everyday processes into a new digital tool is the equivalent of an upgrade.
Oh, I see.
So what organizations typically do is they take their outdated workflows, their disconnected spreadsheets, their vague approval chains, and they just force all of that historical baggage into a brand new, highly expensive architecture.
Wait, so they aren't changing how the work is actually done, they're just changing the URL where people go to do it.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, it feels like buying a state-of-the-art climate-controlled filing cabinet, but instead of organizing your files, you just throw your messy, crumpled, coffee-stained receipts into the drawer and expect the cabinet to magically organize them into a finished tax return.
That is the exact delusion driving these projects. It's a great analogy. What's fascinating here is that a mature GRC platform does not cure organizational dysfunction.
Yes, it doesn't.
No. What it actually does is expose it. It magnifies it. If your internal operating model is weak, the platform doesn't compensate for that weakness at all.
Right. It just shines a giant spotlight on it.
Exactly. It takes all those existing flaws, the duplicated controls, the inconsistent ownership, the workflows that rely on Bob and accounting knowing what to do.
Get it all Bob.
Right. And it makes all of that highly visible across the entire enterprise. You haven't digitized your compliance program. You have merely digitized your dysfunction.
Digitized dysfunction. Man, that is a phrase that probably resonates with a lot of people listening right now.
Oh, absolutely.
And when we look at the root cause of why those messy, crumpled receipt processes persist even in a new system, the source points to something surprisingly foundational. They identify weak taxonomy and data alignment as the primary culprit. We're literally talking about basic language.
Language is the invisible architecture of any software platform. I mean, GRC reporting is really only as reliable as the data model sitting underneath it.
Makes sense. Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. If your internal teams do not agree on basic definitions, your million-dollar platform is going to produce garbage outputs. The GRC PROS article gives a very practical example of this.
That's the example.
So if your information security team defines the word risk one way, but your internal audit team uses that same word to mean something completely different, the system breaks down.
Wow, just from one word.
Yeah. You might have 4 different departments using terms like finding, issue, exception, and control gap totally interchangeably in their daily work.
I have to push back on that, though, because shouldn't a centralized, highly structured dashboard force everyone to get on the same page?
You would think so.
Right. Like, if the new tool only gives you a drop-down menu with 3 strictly defined options, doesn't the software inherently fix the language problem by restricting their choices?
Well, you would hope so, but human behavior usually defeats software constraints if the foundation isn't set first.
How so?
Think about what actually happens when a user faces a drop-down menu with terms they don't agree with or just don't understand.
They just click whatever.
Exactly. They just click the first option available to get past the required field so they can go to lunch.
Oh, man. Yeah, I've definitely done that.
We all have. So the dashboard rolling up to the executive team looks incredibly polished, right? Beautiful pie charts, nice trend lines. But the information feeding it is entirely subjective. It's arbitrary.
It makes me think of a hospital where, like, one doctor's definition of a minor symptom is another doctor's definition of a heart attack.
Oh, that's a scary thought.
Right. But if the central database can't distinguish between the two because the terminology is sloppy, the resulting dashboard isn't just unhelpful. It's going to tell the hospital administrator that everything is totally fine while a patient is in critical condition.
That's spot on. And executives don't need more debatable, subjective dashboards. They need decision-grade visibility.
Decision grade. I like that.
Yeah, without a standardized taxonomy, like a shared dictionary that every single department agrees on before they ever log into the software, what you end up with isn't modernization. It is just confusion at scale.
And that confusion at scale, it cascades downward, right? Hitting the people who actually have to build and maintain the company's systems. The article highlights this massive, often ignored divide. They call it the compliance to engineering gap.
Yes, this is a huge bottleneck.
Because GRC teams understand the regulatory frameworks inside and out, but the engineering teams are the ones who understand how the cloud infrastructure actually operates. And, well, handing a DevOps engineer a dense 70-page regulatory framework PDF is not exactly a strategy.
No, it creates massive friction. It positions the GRC team as a roadblock rather than a partner. The core issue here is translation.
Translation between the two teams.
Right. Compliance requirements have to be translated into practical technical triggers. Let's walk through a scenario here.
Okay, let's hear it.
A compliance officer might look at a framework and pull out a high-level control statement that says, access to sensitive systems must be reviewed periodically.
Sounds pretty standard.
To the compliance officer, that is a clear directive. But to an engineer trying to configure a system, that statement is an unsolvable riddle.
Because the engineer operates in absolutes, right? They are going to look at that statement and ask, well, which specific databases are in scope?
Exactly.
And what does periodically mean? Is that every 30 days or every 90 days? Who exactly owns the review? What is the specific API call or data source we are using to pull the access logs?
You're hitting all the right questions. Furthermore, they need to know how removals are tracked if someone shouldn't have access anymore.
Oh, true. Like an offboarding process.
Right. How are exceptions approved and documented? What specific artifact proves to an external auditor that this review actually occurred?
There's a lot of detail missing from that one sentence.
It is. That translation effort, turning a vague regulatory principle into a highly granular operating procedure, is the heavy lifting that makes GRC functional.
But the software doesn't do that for you.
No. A software platform can help manage the workflow of that review, sure, but the software cannot define the control logic by itself. The organization has to do that difficult translation work first.
Right. But if that translation work doesn't happen, if the taxonomy is weak and engineering is totally disconnected from what compliance is asking for, then the actual daily work of proving the company is compliant falls back onto human shoulders.
And humans get overwhelmed.
They do. And here's where it gets really interesting. If manual evidence is such an obvious bottleneck, why don't teams just automate it on day one? The shiny new tool promises automation, so who or what is actually stopping them?
What stops them is what the source calls the automation illusion.
The automation illusion,
Yeah.
Okay.
Organizations buy these platforms expecting instant, out-of-the-box automation. But because they haven't aligned their data model or translated their controls for the engineering team, true automation is just impossible.
So what happens? They just do it manually anyway.
Exactly. The day-to-day reality defaults back to human effort. You have highly paid professionals frantically emailing spreadsheets back and forth.
Oh, the spreadsheet.
They're taking screenshots of server settings and dumping files into shared drives just to prove they do their jobs. That is not modernization. That is just manual compliance with a much more expensive user interface.
It's the dreaded quarterly fire drill. It's like 11 p.m. on a Friday before the auditors arrive on Monday morning, and everyone just drops their actual work to scramble through their systems, taking screenshots and pasting them into a Word document titled, Audit Evidence Final V3.docs.
We have all seen that exact file, and the source lays out what good actually looks like to prevent that.
What does good look like?
Evidence gathering shouldn't be a human taking a screenshot. It should be reliable, repeatable, and fundamentally connected to your systems of record.
Okay, so how do you do that?
We are talking about utilizing the APIs of your GRC platform to connect directly to your ticketing platforms like Jira, your CI/CD pipelines, your identity systems like Okta or Active Directory, and your vulnerability scanners.
Wait, so instead of Bob logging into the identity system, taking a screenshot of who has admin access and manually uploading it to the GRC tool.
Right.
The GRC tool just pings the identity system directly at midnight every night and basically says, hey, show me the admin list.
Exactly that.
Yep.
The system pulls the log automatically and validates it against the policy. Manual, human-gathered evidence should be the rare exception for highly subjective controls. It shouldn't be the default operating model for the entire enterprise.
But taking this a step further, the article points out that this manual chaos isn't just an internal problem. It is compounded heavily by how companies handle third-party and SaaS vendor risks.
Oh, third-party risk is a massive issue.
Right. And honestly, relying on dozens of external vendors for critical operations feels like a massive blind spot if you are already struggling to manage your own internal evidence.
It is arguably the most dangerous blind spot in modern corporate governance. I mean, today's organizations are entirely dependent on third parties.
Yeah, cloud hosting platforms, AI tools, stuff like that.
External APIs, specialized software vendors, you name it. Yet, despite this massive interconnected risk, many GRC programs still treat third-party risk as a static, disconnected paperwork exercise.
Like, you send a vendor a spreadsheet with 200 security questions once a year, they check the boxes saying, yes, we are totally secure, they sign it, and you file it away in a drawer.
Pretty much.
But wait, if they sign it, doesn't that at least give the company liability coverage? Isn't that the whole point of the questionnaire?
It might offer a thin layer of legal cover, sure, but it offers zero operational reality.
What do you mean by operational reality?
Well, if that vendor is breached and they leak your sensitive customer data, pointing to a signed spreadsheet from 9 months ago doesn't unleak the data.
Fair point.
It doesn't protect your brand reputation. If you treat vendor risk as a static questionnaire, your view of your actual day-to-day exposure is fundamentally blind.
So what's the alternative?
You need to know, in real time, which of those vendors process sensitive data, which ones connect directly to your production systems, and which ones have open security exceptions from last year's audit. Vendor risk has to be treated as continuous operational risk. It needs to be integrated into the same dashboard as your internal controls.
But to fix all of this, to automate the internal evidence, to continuously monitor these external vendors, to force the engineers and compliance officers to speak the same language, someone actually has to be in charge.
Yes, accountability.
Right, which brings us to a massive structural flaw the source identifies. They call it the accountability void.
Which is really about the dangerous assumption of ownership.
It reminds me of the bystander effect, but applied to user interface design.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, like in psychology, if there's an emergency in a crowded street and you just yell, somebody call for help, nobody actually does it.
Because everyone assumes the person next to them is making the call.
Exactly. You have to point at one specific person and say, you in the red shirt, call for help. It feels like corporate governance dashboards have a massive bystander effect built right into them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that analogy translates perfectly to how these systems are configured. The source explicitly warns against the danger of a generic owner field in a GRC platform.
A generic owner field.
Right. Imagine a critical security alert fires off, or a control fails, and it gets routed to a dashboard with just one box that says, Owner, IT Department.
Oh, man. So everyone in IT just assumes someone else on the team is handling the real work.
Exactly. The alert bounces around, workflows get messy, evidence requests sit unanswered for weeks, and actual remediation completely stalls out.
Right.
Accountability cannot be implied in a modern digital system. It must be explicitly structurally designed.
Designed ownership. Okay, what does that actually look like when you are building out the platform? I mean, you can't just put the CEO's name on everything.
No, definitely not. It means breaking down the concept of ownership into its functional, operational parts. A single control might require 5 different types of owners.
5. Wow. Okay, break those down for me.
Sure. You have a business owner who ultimately accepts the risk if things go wrong. You have a technical owner, like an engineer, who actually configures the system firewall.
Okay, that's 2.
Then you have an evidence owner, who is responsible for providing the proof that the firewall works. You have a remediation owner, who is tasked with fixing the firewall when it breaks. And finally, an executive accountable party who signs off on the overarching policy.
And I imagine the technical owner can't be the business owner because the person configuring the system shouldn't be the one deciding if the company accepts the risk of that system failing.
Right.
They're entirely different skill sets and responsibilities.
Precisely the point. If those specific, distinct roles are not explicitly defined and mapped out in your operating model before you launch the software, the platform simply becomes a digital parking lot where important work goes to get stuck.
Okay, so we have deeply diagnosed the illness here. We understand why companies are trapped. They are migrating bad, crumpled receipt processes into new cabinets. They are speaking different languages because of weak taxonomy.
Okay.
They are faking automation with 11 p.m. screenshots. They are treating massive vendor risk as a paperwork exercise, and they have built a system where everyone assumes someone else is in charge.
It sounds incredibly bleak when you list it all out like that.
It really does, but the source material provides a very specific cure for this, right? A 90-day GRC modernization roadmap. How does a project manager actually execute this without getting fired for delaying the software launch?
Well, it requires a phased, highly disciplined approach, and you touched on the exact friction point there, organizational patience.
People want results immediately.
They do. But the roadmap starts with the first 30 days, and the primary directive from the source here is crucial. Do not touch the platform configuration.
Wait, really? Hands off the keyboard entirely?
Completely.
But how do you realistically tell a CEO or a VP of IT who just spent $1 million on software and wants an ROI report that you aren't even going to log into the system for a month?
It's a tough conversation. But you have to explain that the first 30 days are about finding the bodies buried in the current process so you don't accidentally pave over them.
Oh, I like that.
You spend this month stabilizing the foundation. You interview the stakeholders. You identify the pain points that cause those 11 p.m. Friday fire drills.
Right.
You review the current manual workflows, and you map out the ownership gaps we just discussed. You document exactly where the current operating model is fundamentally breaking down. The goal of this first phase isn't to build a single dashboard. The goal is simply absolute clarity on the current state of the mess.
Which makes sense logically, but, IT teams are always itching to start building dashboards on day 2 to show progress.
They are, and the pressure is immense, which is exactly why so many implementations fail. You have to hold the line and protect the project's foundation.
Okay, so what happens after day 30?
Because once you achieve that clarity, you move to days 31 through 60, which is redesigning the operating model.
Redesigning. Got it.
This is where you fix the dictionary. You establish the taxonomy. You get everyone to agree on what a risk is versus an issue. You clarify exactly what acceptable automated evidence looks like, and you design practical workflows on paper that balance strict governance discipline with actual day-to-day usability for the employees.
So you are essentially drawing the architectural blueprints, getting them approved by the city planners, and ensuring the plumbing connects properly before you pour a single ounce of concrete.
That's a perfect way to look at it. And only after the blueprints are signed off do you move to days 61 through 90.
The final phase.
Right. Build for adoption. Now, finally, you configure the platform based on those redesigned processes. You pilot your automation by actually connecting to the CI/CD pipelines or the identity systems via API.
The fun part.
Exactly. And perhaps most importantly, you test your new dashboards by asking real, difficult leadership questions to see if the data holds up to scrutiny.
So what does this all mean? When you as a listener step back and look at this entire journey, what does this actually mean for your daily life?
Well, it shifts the whole focus.
Ultimately, it means that executive reporting shouldn't just display activity. It's not about a beautiful pie chart showing how many tasks were completed or how many questionnaires were signed. It needs to provide decision-grade visibility.
Exactly.
An executive should be able to look at the system and instantly know which specific controls are failing, which third-party vendors are currently creating operational exposure, and where financial investment or additional headcount is actually needed to secure the business.
And to achieve that, you have to be honest about the warning signs that your modernization effort is going off track.
What are the warning signs?
This raises an important question, right? The source points out some fantastic red flags to watch for.
Okay, let's hear them.
If your implementation project is being led entirely as an IT configuration effort without heavy involvement from the business users who actually do the work, you're heading for failure.
Makes sense.
If you are focusing on being dashboard first, obsessing over how the charts look, instead of being data model first, you are heading for failure.
Right.
And if your engineering teams view the new platform as just another annoying compliance burden rather than an integrated tool, you haven't fixed the operating model. You've just changed the scenery.
It all comes back to the core realization from that GRC PROS article. GRC platform modernization is not a software upgrade, it is a business capability upgrade.
Couldn't have said it better.
If you are listening to this and you're in the middle of one of these massive software projects or your company is about to start one, you have to look closely at your own workplace tools and ask yourself the hard, uncomfortable question. Are we truly modernizing our program, or are we just buying a more expensive filing cabinet for our crumpled receipts?
That's the real question. And, to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to ponder.
Oh, I love these.
The source briefly mentions the rise of AI-enabled systems making their way into these modern corporate environments.
Of course, AI is everywhere now.
Right. Think about everything we just discussed regarding human behavior. If a standard rule-based software platform merely exposes and digitizes existing human dysfunction, what happens when you plug autonomous AI agents into an environment that already suffers from a weak taxonomy and assumed ownership?
Oh, wow.
Will that AI miraculously sort out your crumpled receipts and figure out the mess for you? Or will it simply hallucinate compliance, invent evidence to satisfy a vague requirement, and scale your organizational chaos at lightning speed, completely hidden behind a slick interface?
Man, that is a terrifying thought for anyone relying on those systems to keep their company secure. Scaling chaos at lightning speed.
It's definitely something to think about.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll catch you next time.